Gene Kranz had the qualities of being a leader. He demanded respect, he demanded responsibility, he demanded performance.
So he's accomplished a lot not only in his own time in the space program, but also set a high mark for others to follow on.
Few are respected more. The great problem solving, the leadership, that drive, that will, that vision, Gene deserves to be remembered in the highest regard.
Eugene Kranz grew up in Toledo, Ohio, with a love of aviation and space travel. He later earned his aeronautical engineering degree from St. Louis University, was commissioned in the Air Force, and earned his wings at Laughlin Air Force Base in Del Rio. After a tour in Korea, Gene joined McDonnell Aircraft as a flight test engineer. He was only 27 when he arrived at NASA in 1960. The timing could not have been better.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal, before this decade is out, of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth.
It was the apex, the peak of competitive Cold War, and it was expressed through space travel. And it's important to remember Gene was there at the beginning.
Gene moved quickly up the ranks as Mission Control Procedures Officer for all 6 manned Mercury missions.
Roger, Capcom, we're go for staging.
I recognized very early on when he came into that flight control center at Cape Canaveral, there's a guy that is a real winner, a real guy that's going to be a great part of what we do here.
Gene wrote the go, no-go procedures that gave the flight director ultimate control to abort a mission. And he was in mission control for Mercury Atlas 6 when John Glenn became the first U.S. astronaut to orbit the Earth.
Well, I think Gene performed under some very adverse circumstances and set an example that other people can try and also achieve. And that's a big order.
Gene was flight director of Apollo 1, when on January 27, 1967, a capsule fire on the launch pad killed all 3 crew members.
Gene got up and spoke, and he commenced to tell us that we were all to blame. That we were to blame because we were negligent in not stopping things, and that we didn't know enough to know what was wrong and do something about it. From now on, we would be tough and competent. The place was dead quiet.
Tough and competent. Gene ordered all members of Flight Control to write these words on their office blackboards and never erase them.
In his brain, he said, we'll never let that happen again. And we're going to do everything we can to make sure it doesn't happen.
I think that was the key moment when the Apollo ground team was molded into what it later became.
In 1969, Gene was in charge of the team that put Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin on the moon, landing with only 17 seconds of fuel remaining. The landing fulfilled President Kennedy's challenge.
One giant leap for mankind.
It lifted our spirits and our capabilities, and we created things beyond our own imagination. We pulled this country together, and he led that effort. He created the mission control to support space travel. And we did go to the moon first. America did win that race.
Houston, we've had a problem.
Less than 9 months later, Gene was flight director for the 3rd mission to the moon when an oxygen tank exploded aboard Apollo 13. Under unimaginable pressure, the mission became one of survival. Gene and the mission control teams held the lives of the crew in their hands.
Okay, now let's everybody keep cool. Let's solve the problem, but let's not make it any worse by guessing.
I don't think we could have been in better hands. What Gene did was he fostered good leader throughout the organization. And good leadership, of course, fosters teamwork. And that's exactly what Gene did in his mission control teams.
In my mind, I just have this visage of him, this incredible just look on his face, and just looking up at the monitors with just such seriousness, such weight of the world on his shoulders. And It was palpable.
The Apollo 13 crew was faced with fading power, a freezing spacecraft, carbon dioxide poisoning, and the possibility of remaining in space forever.
So he had the people in the back room taking parts off of a simulator and seeing if they could pipe oxygen around and use duct tape that they knew was on board to put these things together to keep the people alive that were up there.
In 1995, director Ron Howard told the story of Apollo 13 in an Oscar-winning film with Ed Harris playing Gene Kranz.
We never lost an American in space. We're sure as hell not going to lose one on my watch. Failure is not an option.
There's something so resolute about it that is, it's moving. And dare I say, it's kind of quintessentially American.
Gene showed that he was not only in charge, but he was mentally in charge. He was collected, he knew the situation, he knew what reserves of time he had, he knew what the best thing to do was, and he was going to see that we did it.
We learned how to fight problems. We learned how to work as a team. And Gene was the leader of all that.
There they are. There they are. They've made it. Hello, Houston. This is Honoree. It's good to see you again.
The Apollo 13 crew made it back home, and for their heroic efforts, Gene and the members of Mission Operations received the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Gene continued his role as flight director through Apollo 17, always wearing his trademark vests made by his wife Marta. The Apollo 13 vest is on display at the National Air and Space Museum. Gene retired from NASA in 1994. He later authored the book Failure is Not an Option, and continues to be a popular speaker around the world.
If you're looking for character, that's Gene. Gene stamped an image of competence on the mission control function that has lasted for more than 50 years.
Gene Kranz's legacy is going to be one of what we had done during that 50 years, from Kennedy's announcement to the last flight of the shuttle.
You believed in him. Those men performed for Gene. Gene inspired them. That's a huge legacy of Gene's.
Tonight we honor Gene Kranz with the History-Making Texan Award for his grace under pressure and the critical role he played in putting man on the moon.